I'm looking at our operating budget calendar. This May 2025, where it says draft budget is presented to City Council and community for review and comment, that's at a council meeting.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay. I still don't see anything here that is an actual budget workshop at the Morris Vance Room where we can really have community input. This is not going to be driving community input, obviously. We got zero input today. I want to see something on this budget calendar that is an actual community workshop. Can we do that? Can we ensure that that happens? I want that well before council adopts a final budget. I will leave it up to staff to figure out where and when we should have that. If you need help, I will go ahead and sponsor it under my position. Okay, so that's the thing. Really interesting to bring up Warren Buffett. He's actually sitting on the largest cash pile that he's ever sat on, and I think that's the, when I heard Councilmember O'Donnell say that it's going to get worse, we're not economists here, but we can see what other people are doing. And, one of the most strategic and incredible investors of our time just sold out of the S&P. He just sold Vanguard. Okay. He's sitting on a huge cash pile. Why do you think that is? Because the economy is getting worse and worse, and the mismanage it from the very top is making it very difficult. We have had way too much quantitative easing in this economy from a national level since 2008. And you know what that did? It drove income inequality through the roof, because cheap money is not good to have for a long time. And it drives an incredible amount of speculation, which is why I really hope that we do see this increase of 4% in our property, right, tax. But I do kind of sit in the same camp on this one with Councilmember O'Donnell. And I think that I would really like to see a different, just like a very emergency planning that takes into account not a 4% increase. Just, I know that it's a lot of work, but just even a ballpark figure, because I think that there could be a lot of variation in that. And maybe it's not for, the 2 years that we looked at, but maybe it's beyond that, just to kind of understand what that would look like. Maybe it's not warranted, I don't know. But just as a, possibility. And I'll leave it up to you if you think that's a good idea or not. You don't have to answer now, but if you have an answer, I'm here.
Well, I would just say property taxes, I usually joke with staff, if we're going to talk about watercraft, property taxes corner like a trash barge, sales tax corners like a speedboat. Property tax takes a long time to come down or go back up. Right. So we feel pretty good with that estimate. Sales tax, sure, it's certainly open to more volatility, and it's driven by incomes and capital gains for sure. But property tax typically, other than the case of 2008, 2010, and it took several years to get back to that level, outside of that type of an event, it tends to be fairly stable.
Yes, but when it goes down and we're counting on it, because here's the thing, and we've had this conversation back and forth before, there is the ability for someone to reassess their property value, which is a decrease in what we receive as property tax. So I just want to be cognizant of that. Right, where is the housing market right now? It's, is it going to grow forever? Maybe. I mean, it's not necessarily the best assumption, because history is quite telling that isn't always the case. And maybe way down the line, it doubles, right? But there's going to be fluctuations there. And I just want to be understanding that a little bit more, and what the implications are to, a draft budget for 27, 28. even, right? I think for right now, okay, we'll keep those assumptions, but maybe we can look at, 3% and what that does.
We do get annual updates from our property tax consultant, and obviously, if there's a material downturn, say in year 3 to 4 to 5 from now, outside of this 2-year budget, we would reflect those numbers.
Okay.
I would like to add that our property tax breakdown includes about 17 million to 17.7 million each fiscal years for the ad valorem property tax. So that's the the 1% property tax on the homes. It also includes about hold on one second, let me get that number. 14 million in VLF property tax compensation. That's vehicle license fee in lieu that we receive. And then we're also receiving 1484 waterfall funds from our redevelopment properties. And those are actually, we believe those to be estimated conservatively in this budget process. So that kind of is a little bit more of a breakdown of our property taxes.
And how long do we receive that last category? Is that like infinite, or is there an end time on that? I believe there is, right?
It'll eventually just be wrapped up into our property taxes when
it
it's
won't
unwound.
go away. There just won't be a former RDA area,
Right.
project area. It'll just all be general fund.
Okay. Yeah, we are always saving. We do that every single year. In fact, we wanted as a council to provide more transparency when it came to all our reserves. I think we've done a phenomenal job of doing that. Regardless of how we change the name of it, this concept is still the same. Yes.
Just if I comment,
Yeah.
the structural reserve account was a contributing factor to that consolidation. And when we did the risk-based reserve analysis in 2022, economic recessions were one of the risks we obviously weighed in there. I mean, in addition to, human disasters, terrorist attacks, floods, fires, things outside of economic conditions, but economic conditions were considered in that more directly that 30 to 35% range. And at the time, we actually had included pension risk in there as well, and we have that separate pension reserve, with the Section 115 trust. So if you look at those in a combined fashion, we're probably close to the top. I haven't compared recently, in the last 3 years, but I want to think Poway's, that's the city that comes to mind. I think their general fund reserve is like 45%. And if you were to combine our two numbers, we're probably very, very near that or above it. I'm not going to do the math right now, but many other cities
Significantly higher than what we're talking about, the 32.5% when we're looking at also what we set aside.
Yes, the 115.
And we were able to realize some returns on that in a different way.
Correct, yeah.
Right, that we wouldn't have had we just kept to maintain everything the same. And so I very much remember that conversation. And so I very much want to bring it to the public light that we already thought about this and we actually are doing better with their money, and we made it more transparent and easier to follow. That's all I have. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Melendez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Contreras, for referencing income inequality. I can absolutely guarantee that income inequality will continue to get worse. But I wanted to respond to, Mayor, your solicitation of ideas for a balanced budget. And I'm not interested in putting forth a list of cuts, especially when the city manager is prepared to come to me with an alternative. But I do believe that we have a regulatory responsibility, and there's some areas that we're not fulfilling that. I would like to see a better regulatory environment to ensure economic success. And right now we have a number of corporate and commercial property owners in our city that have allowed for vacant storefronts. They have been not only an eyesore and a public safety risk, but also an economic disadvantage. Some cities have enacted fines on these types of owners, and I think the city of Vista could do the same.
Councilmember O'Donnell.
Yeah, I would be in agreement. I do want to explore all options, but I'm not willing to kill the goose to get the egg, you know? But with the comments that our city manager brought forward, I am confident that a balanced budget will come back, but we certainly do need to look at every avenue moving forward. You know, Mayor, your comments, although veiled in deep sarcasm, I understand where you're coming from, but when you're trying to build unity on this council, especially when you believe that you have people agreeing with you, that is not the attempt at doing so that I would take. But I do have two questions for you. What's the maximum we've ever held in reserve as far as a percentage, or the highest amount, I should say? So we're at a sliding scale now between 30 and 35%. What was the highest percentage that we've
As a
held?
percentage for just of the emergency reserves, I believe at one point we were at 35%, but it's worth mentioning that was on a budget. If it was 4 years ago, that might have been 85 or $90 million. Got
it.
Which is a fraction of what it is now. And I highlighted, you know, yes, the budget has grown, but there's also been new revenue sources as well as exponential growth in sales tax.
I ask that because I feel like we're in a very comparable situation to where we've been historically since we've built our reserve. In fact, I believe in the last decade, all we've done is increase it almost year over year in that time frame.
To maintain the funding percentage as the budget grows, obviously, it requires a nominal contribution, yeah.
Yeah. So I know that this is only through 2027, but I do have a question for you. When does Prop L end?
Prop L ends on March 31st, 2037.
What happens to this budget when we lose Prop L?
Without another funding source, cuts would have to be made unless, again, there was some sort of exponential increase in an existing revenue, which is highly unlikely.
And do we anticipate Prop L is going to relatively remain the same, around $12 million, or do we think that will go up over the course of the next 12 years?
It should go up somewhat following the rate of inflation. So we usually, the next few years, we work with a consultant who has a 5-year forecast, and beyond that, we budget it as increasing by 2% per year. We're conservative on that.
So you're probably talking 14, 15, maybe not that much, but you're talking 13, 14 million dollars over the course. Where are we at on here? Thank you, Councilmember Fox.
Here we go. So we can.
Yeah, I'm looking at $15,365,987.25 or 35.36.
Correct, and the last year is just because it's 3/4 of a year instead of a full year.
So do you think it might be prudent to take this to the public at some point to have a discussion on what it might look like if we do not continue Prop L, and what it would look like not just to the city's budget, but to their public service as well?
It's really a question of the public's desire for level of service, but as I said in my opening remarks, looking several years into the future, without this funding, there would be a structural deficit for sure.
So this is what I would say to our city manager, that if we're going to have a larger scope discussion on our budget, and we're going to have a totality of it and have a true discussion about it, that should be included in the discussion and what those shortfalls might look like in the future, not just in the near term, but the genuine impacts it would have long after we don't sit on this dais and sit in these positions. Those are all my comments. Look, if we get to the point where we need to do a hiring freeze, we'll get there when we come there. I don't think we're there yet, but like I said, I do want to explore every option that is necessary, and I trust in your ability to bring us something back or to have a conversation even offline about where the potential is for that. So again, thank you for all your work, and that's all I have for now.
Councilmember Fox.
Yeah. I just had a couple quick clarifying questions because I wasn't here when we had the strategic reserves and everything. Are you talking about having in addition to the emergency reserves, having a separate strategic reserve fund that's more of, like you were saying, like a checking account where instead of buying things on debt, you're saving up money to do the larger capital expenditures up front?
We had a structural budget reserve account, which to my recollection had about $7 million at one time in it.
Before the consolidation, it had just over 9. It was a 9.3, I believe.
It had grown to $9.3 million. And what we did is, did we move that money into the 115? Is that what we did? We moved it into the emergency reserve?
We combined it with the core emergency reserves, along with, I believe we had just under $5 million set aside outside of the Section 115 trust, but it was earmarked for a CalPERS reserve. So we combined those three accounts, oh gosh, I think it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, to create that aggregate emergency reserve account in an effort to be more transparent, as Councilmember Contreras mentioned.
So we have the 115 pension reserve, trust reserve. We had the structural deficit reserve, which we no longer have, and we have the emergency. Well, is that not accurate?
One thing I was going to add
Was that not because Councilmember Contreras made a sort of a hissing noise to seem to indicate that that wasn't accurate? Well, I mean, is that, well, I'm having a colloquy here with our finance director. Do we not have the structural deficit reserve? I thought we eliminated it.
It wasn't eliminated, it was consolidated into the emergency reserves account.
Well, so we no longer have a structural deficit reserve account.
In title, we do not, but the sum of funds are still in the consolidated account.
Well, you're calling it the consolidated account. What's the, I call it the emergency reserve. What do you call it?
It's the general fund emergency reserve.
Okay.
Okay.
There you
I
go.
think that answers my question. If there was year-end balance as of right now that went unspent, maybe city manager, you can tell me, or one of you can tell me, where would that money go if we did not spend all of our year-end balance currently? Would it just automatically roll into our emergency reserve?
If the year-end fund balance was not earmarked to a project or rolled into one of the general funds reserves, then it would sit in the term is unassigned fund balance. So basically, it would function as funding just without an earmark.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, because if the request is to just have some money on hand to do larger projects up front without doing debt, I mean, I definitely don't have a problem with that. I think it's not bad to have a checking account. But that was pretty much on that. And I think that one thing that you mentioned is that we are kind of budgeting on that 34% of the bell curve. Is that the right number? A 60.
We typically will be at least one standard deviation above that, which creates better probability than the coin flip. And frankly, that's the reason why we end up, in nearly every year with a positive fund balance, because we don't want to come to council ideally with a shortfall where we do have to dig into reserves to be balanced when we create our audited financials.
Okay, good. I think I just wanted to clarify some of those things. So looking at these numbers, I can feel a little bit better about where we're at. And so if we do end up balancing this budget, we can be pretty confident that we'll have some year-end fund balance, and that, and then I think we should have a conversation of, having some additional savings if that's something that, we'd like to do for sure. So that's it. I'll relinquish the floor.
Councilmember O'Donnell, I apologize for my attempt at humor if it came off as sarcasm. I appreciate that you and I have often been able to work together, and despite any difference in any philosophy, sometimes we're going the same direction and we wind up there together. I could not help but notice that some members of the council were expressing concern about things that they had not expressed in the last number of years, and I'm not sure what changed in the last 3 months that's different now, that's freed certain council members to express that concern, but I'm glad that they are. I just look at it without regard. I mean, because I don't know what's going to happen with the global economy, the national economy. As far as I can look at this, is with an eye towards, again, how do I run my business and my personal finances? I don't care what happens with the economy. I mean, I do, trust me. I mean, I've lost a lot of money in the last month as the market's gone down, but I hope it's going to come back. Thank goodness I'm young enough. I've got a runway ahead of me. But the point is, because I don't spend more than I take in, and because I do save and I invest for the future, for my retirement, I'm in a place where, I feel like my decisions have put me in that good place. The bottom line is we had a structural reserve account that we could move money out of without the community seeing that we had tapped an account labeled emergency reserve. When you create an account called emergency reserve, a decent respect to the public opinion would indicate that you would actually have an emergency before you would spend money in the emergency reserve fund. At least that's how my common sense sensibility works. There's nothing wrong with having money in a reserve that is an operating reserve, that is a, money that we're not labeling as emergency only. At one time, did we not achieve 35%? I think we did.
As I said, we did when the
our emergency
overall
reserve.
budget was it was a smaller denominator, yeah.
The $9 million we had in the structural reserve was added on top of the 35%.
Point of clarification, the,
I'm happy to hear the answer.
okay, the answer is no.
But you've been, we've got our finance director here. Let's hear what he has to say about it. The structural deficit reserve fund was not part of the emergency reserve fund before we combined the two of them.
Correct.
Is it your position that we had reached a 35% number? 35% for those members of the community watching is the percentage of our annual general fund expenditure.
You're talking about before the consolidation,
Before
just
the
in the
consolidation.
emergency reserve. I would have to go back and research that. It was a sizable number. It was certainly the largest component of the consolidated account, but I don't recall if it was 35%.
Well, I know that it had been our goal to be at 35%. I don't know if the city manager remembers the number. Councilmember Contreras' recollection is different than my own. And frankly, we got a lot of numbers in front of us, and maybe her memory's better than mine, but I don't think so. If you want to bring up the numbers here, and I'm sure, look, if only we had the records and we could settle this dispute. I'm not really sure it matters, but it does seem to matter to you right now. I believe that we were at 35%, and we had the 9%, and we had money in our 119. Understand that when we combined the structural reserve, which was our checking account reserve money, when we collapsed that into the emergency reserve, when Mr. Sylvia talked about we're adding money every year, we're adding nominal dollars every year in order to maintain a consistent balance of real dollars, okay? Real dollars being the number that we've set, real dollars meaning dollars that have the same purchasing power as the dollars that we held in that account last year. Okay, I only took 1 year of econ in college, so forgive me if my education is falling me short here. But yes, in order to maintain a level amount with the same purchasing power, because of inflation, we have to add more and more to that emergency reserve every year. When we collapsed the structural reserve into the emergency reserve, we functionally reduced the total amount of real dollars that we had available in total reserves. So for that year, we didn't have to make a big contribution. And then we went from a 35% number down to a 32.5% number. And so what this council has been doing, the memory of my colleague here who passionately disagrees notwithstanding, what we have been doing is we have been reducing our reserves, and we have been, and the reason I didn't have a big blow up about it when we got there, although I did speak against it, is that we still remain to this day in a very strong position. And I want to make sure the community knows what I am advocating for, and the reason that I am speaking right now, and obviously not making some of my colleagues happy, is because this city has been in such, and I'm going to leave in 2 years, and I want this city to stay in a strong financial position. And as a citizen of this city, I am going to continue as a citizen to conduct oversight and to hold this council accountable for its spending decisions. And I promise you, I'm going to be very involved in the future of this city as a citizen. I promise you that. And I do not want to see it come to pass, as it has, with Carlsbad and San Marcos and Escondido and the county of San Diego and in our county out of the 19 municipal governments here, I do not want to see this city be the next one to slip into long-term deficit situations where we sit there and look at each other and, you know, what's the city of San Diego is 231 million, county of San Diego 138 million. And you know, Todd Gloria is sitting there firing the COO and the city manager and taking up their jobs. Well, great, you just got $600,000 back, but you haven't closed a $238 million deficit. My point, and the reason I'm wasting all of our time is I'm not wasting our time. If we are careful with the decisions we make today, we will not be in the position that these other neighbors of ours are in right now because they have failed to have the proper outlook and conservative fiscal management approach. I am simply begging you as a fellow citizen of this city to protect what we have built over the last decade, because when I got here, we had no reserves, we were in 7 years of deficit, and we have fought this city to a position of great financial strength. And I'm telling you, it's part of the legacy that I'm now here to defend, and I'm very proud of it, where we've gotten to. And I have absolutely seen this council work to, you know, dial back the level of financial security that we've built. And I'm not happy about it, because it is the legacy of the council of the last decade to put our city in this great position of strength, and our staff. And I really appreciate all of us getting to that place, but it's going to take fighting. And so when I hear this great hand-wringing and gnashing of teeth about where the economy might go, and I don't know, you might be right. I hope you're wrong, you know, but you might well be right. But if I can use that motivation to bring us to say, you know, maybe we need to look at where some of our operational efficiencies are, since we are looking at a preliminary number you've brought to us of $2 million of, you know, of right now at this exact moment, you don't know where the $2 million is coming from. I think our job as the budget overseers of this city includes asking for a list of cuts. I am asking, and staff will bring back a list of potential cuts for this council to consider, because it is our job to ask staff where operational efficiencies can be achieved. And if staff cannot propose things that it thinks we might be able to live without for us to have a spirited and fair and honest conversation about, then staff's not doing its job. We have to be completely willing to review all of our discretionary expenditures. We have to be willing to review all of our expenditures. We have the opportunity here to continue to be leaders that are proud of the financial condition of our city, and not just proud of our financial condition, but proud of our first responders, first-class equipment. When I go, and I don't want to name our neighbors because they're our neighbors in close proximity to us who are our good friends, and they have fire engines that are 30 years old, and they do not look like the brand new engines that our firefighters are running through the city of Vista. I am so proud that we have beautiful streets and beautiful fire engines and brand new ambulances and a new city hall. I mean, we have so much to brag about here, and I want to keep it going that way. And so if it seems like I'm making a joke or being sarcastic, I am not. I am deeply passionate about protecting the financial position of this city. Prop L, how much is the Prop L money? Is it still $1.2 million? What's the total amount that goes into the operating budget?
It's about 1.2 million to the
It's
fire
1.2 million. 10 years ago, when I became a council member, that $1.2 million sounded like a whole lot more. And I knew, just like when I bought my house for $500,000, and I said to my wife, I said, one day our house would be worth $1 million. And now it's worth like the average household in San Diego. You know, I just didn't think it would be 6 years later or 7 years. But this $1.2 million has been eroded greatly by inflation. It sounded like a big number. In another 12 years, $1.2 million is going to be a rounding error. And that was the idea, and I didn't support Prop L. I didn't think we needed a building, and I still don't think we need a building finer and fancier in style than any other person working in the city of Vista. There is no person that works in a building as nice as this one in the city. We are the only ones that enjoy this level of grade A Class A fancy office, and I didn't think we needed it then, and I don't know that we need it now. But now that the taxpayers have invested in it, I'm fully committed to maintaining and preserving their investment. I share your concern about the quantitative easing, which is AKA printing money, which stole money from people who had saved money and built reserves of their own, because it drove inflation, and it meant that people who had saved money had the wealth stolen right out of their account because they could no longer purchase as much with that money that they'd saved as they previously could. So you and I are in full agreement, 100% about that. But I just, I think I'm actually, in a way, I'm kind of glad, Mr. Connolly, that we saw this number, because it really gave us impetus to have a spirited conversation. We've got some very real decisions to make, and I'm asking for a very serious and real approach to making sure that we have a budget that we can all be very proud of. So I look forward to working with all of you in the most collegial manner possible to make sure that we have a budget that we can all brag about. Anybody else want to say anything? Very good. I'll put you on my list of endorsers. Anything else from staff? We have a special meeting. We didn't have any oral comments. So I believe, looking at my agenda here, we are adjourned. Thank you to staff for your excellent presentation. I appreciate it. Appreciate all your hard work. And we know you're going to bring us back a balanced budget, because you haven't seen the half of it up here if we don't.